She hid between a billionaire's legs to escape her ex, and accidentally made him fall in love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. That night, the rain was falling in sharp silver lines across the glowing parking lot of the Sterling Hotel. Wind whipped between the parked cars, carrying the faint sound of a woman's footsteps running fast. Her breath came in gasps. Her name was Mia. Her coat was too thin, her shoes soaked through, but she did not dare to stop. Behind her, a man's angry voice echoed through the lot, shouting her name, promising she would not get away this time. Her heart pounded as she scanned for an exit, any exit. Then she saw the lights of the hotel bar through a glass door and ran inside. The sudden warmth made her dizzy. The room was quiet except for low jazz music and the clink of glasses. Men in suits turned to look as she stumbled in. Her wet hair clung to her face. She spotted a tall man sitting alone at a corner table, reading something on his phone. He looked calm, composed, distant from the noise of the world. Without thinking, Mia rushed to him. Her pulse hammered. In one desperate motion, she crouched down beside him and pressed herself into the shadows under the table. Her trembling hands gripped his leg. The man froze. The air between them tightened. A second later, the glass door burst open again, and the man she had been running from stormed in, his eyes sweeping the bar. The stranger looked down, meeting Mia's terrified gaze beneath the table. She whispered, barely breathing, "Please, do not let him see me." For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then, with slow confidence, he set down his phone, rose from his seat, and stood between her and the entrance. "Evening." His voice was calm, deep, steady. "Can I help you with something?" The pursuer glared. "Did you see a woman come through here? Brown hair, blue coat?" The man's expression did not change. "No, just me." The other man hesitated, then cursed under his breath and turned back toward the rain. The door slammed. Silence settled again. The stranger waited a few moments before kneeling slightly and glancing under the table. "He is gone," he said quietly. Mia's hands loosened. Her whole body shook from fear and cold. She rose slowly, brushing her hair from her face, her eyes wide and red from crying. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to. It is all right," he interrupted gently, removing his jacket and placing it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. "You were scared. Anyone would be." She blinked, still trying to catch her breath. The man looked at her closely now. Her cheeks were pale. Her knees scraped. Her clothes soaked through. She looked lost and small. Yet there was something fierce in her eyes, something that refused to break. "Come," he said quietly, motioning toward a booth near the back. "You should sit down. I will get you some water." She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if the nightmare might return. He added, "You are safe here, I promise." Mia Saturday. The warmth of the booth felt unreal after the storm. When he returned, he placed a glass before her, his movements slow and deliberate, like someone used to being obeyed. His hands were steady, his voice measured. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "You did not have to help me." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe not, but sometimes we are meant to show up at the right time." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, under the soft light, their eyes met for the first time. She did not know his name yet. She only knew that, for the first time in months, someone had stood between her and the storm. And he, Adrian Sterling, did not know why a stranger's touch had made his heart move after so many years of silence. The next morning, gray light leaked through the curtains of a small motel room. Mia sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the heavy jacket that the stranger had given her. The scent of cedar and rain still lingered in the fabric. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow of her ex's face, twisted with anger. The storm had stopped, but inside her, the air still felt heavy. She ran her fingers along the inside pocket of the jacket and found a folded card. It read simply, "Adrian Sterling. No title. No company. Just a name." For a moment, she thought about calling the number below, then quickly tucked it away. She did not want to bother him. He had already done more than enough. Outside, traffic hummed like a constant reminder that life kept moving even when she stood still. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror, dark circles under her eyes, a bruise blooming near her collarbone, her hair tangled from the rain. The woman staring back at her looked like someone she did not know. "You have to get up," she whispered to herself. "You have to keep going." By 9 o'clock, she was back on the street, clutching her small bag. She stopped at a diner near the corner of Fifth Avenue and Maple. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped in. The waitress behind the counter smiled politely. "Coffee?" Mia nodded. The warmth of the mug in her hands felt like safety. She opened her wallet. Inside were $8.50. Enough for breakfast, but not for rent. Her job at the florist had ended 2 weeks ago. The owner's nephew had taken her place. She had been sending out applications ever since, but no one called back. Landlords did not wait for hope. Bills did not either. As she stirred her coffee, her thoughts drifted back to the night before. The stranger's voice had been calm, almost unshakable. He had not asked for explanations, had not demanded gratitude. He had simply helped. For someone who had spent months being blamed, shouted at, and cornered, that small mercy felt enormous. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Did you get home safe? Adrian?" She froze. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but her fingers moved before she could stop them. "Yes. Thank you. I am fine," she added. "You did not have to help me. I will return your jacket when I can." Seconds later, the reply came. "Keep it. You might need it again." She smiled despite herself. Then, guilt washed over her. She did not deserve kindness from someone she barely knew. People like him belonged to a different world, a world of safety, confidence, and control. She had been living paycheck to paycheck since she turned 21, bouncing between jobs and temporary rooms. When her ex, Derek, came into her life, he had seemed like a way out. He was charming at first, expensive suits, grand gestures, promises of stability. But behind closed doors, charm turned to control. He read her messages, criticized her clothes, shouted when she spoke to strangers. Leaving him had taken courage she did not know she had. Last night had proved that the past could still find her, even when she thought she was free. Mia left a few bills on the counter and stepped back into the cool air. The jacket's collar brushed her chin, and for a second she felt safer again. She headed toward the employment office, 3 blocks away. Inside, the room smelled of old paper and coffee. People waited in line, filling out forms with tired eyes. A middle-aged clerk glanced at her resume and sighed. "You have experience in service work?" "Yes," she answered. "Florist, waitress, housekeeping." The woman nodded without enthusiasm. "I will see what I can find. Check back next week." Outside again, the city seemed louder. A delivery truck honked. A group of students laughed as they passed. Life moved on. Mia pressed her hand to the jacket pocket where the card rested. Maybe she could call him and ask if he knew of any openings. No, that would be wrong. He was a stranger. A kind stranger, but still. By late afternoon, clouds gathered again. She stopped by a park bench to rest, watching pigeons peck at crumbs near her shoes. The wind carried the smell of roasted nuts from a nearby cart. It reminded her that she had skipped lunch. She took out a small notepad from her bag and began sketching the scene, the birds, the trees, the blurred faces of people rushing home. Drawing was the one thing that made her forget how close she was to falling apart. When the first raindrops started to fall, she tucked the notepad away and pulled the jacket tighter. She whispered softly, almost as if he could hear her. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling." That night, she returned to the motel. The neon sign outside flickered, buzzing faintly. As she closed the door behind her, she felt the exhaustion of the day weigh on her shoulders. She looked again at the name on the card. For a long moment, she just stared at it, then placed it carefully on the nightstand. She did not know that, across the city, Adrian Sterling sat in his penthouse office, the same rain tapping against the windows. His assistant had long gone home, but he remained at his desk, scrolling through emails he was not reading, thinking about the woman who had hidden beneath his table. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him: money, connections, approval. Yet last night, when she clung to him, there had been no motive, no calculation, only fear and trust. He could still feel the tremor of her hands, and for reasons he could not explain, he found himself wondering whether she was safe. For both of them, the night that began in chaos had left behind something they could not name: a quiet thread of connection, stretching between two worlds that were never meant to touch. 2 weeks passed. The city had already slipped from winter gray to the first pale colors of spring. The rain came and went, washing the streets clean but leaving the air cold and sharp. Mia had managed to find a small job at a neighborhood cafe on the east side of town, the kind of place that smelled of fresh bread and roasted beans. The pay was low, but it kept her busy and kept her mind from wandering to things she could not fix. Each morning she arrived before sunrise, tying her apron and wiping the counter while the first light spilled through the front window. The cafe's old radio hummed softly, and the same regular customers shuffled in at predictable hours: office workers, college students, tired parents. It was routine, quiet, safe. On her third Monday, the bell over the door chimed again. She turned to greet whoever entered, balancing a tray of clean mugs in her hands, and then she froze. Standing there, rain dripping from the shoulders of his tailored coat, was Adrian Sterling. His dark hair was damp, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, those calm gray eyes, met hers as if the 2 weeks had been only seconds. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "Do you still make coffee here, or have I missed breakfast?" Mia nearly dropped the tray. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered, setting the mugs down quickly. "I mean Adrian. I did not expect to see you here." He smiled faintly. "I could say the same." The owner, a kindly woman named Clara, walked by and whispered, "You know him?" Mia nodded awkwardly. "He helped me once." Adrian found a corner table, the same quiet patience in his movements as that night in the hotel bar. She brought him a cup of black coffee and set it down. "Still no sugar?" she asked. "Still no sugar," he replied. Then, after a pause, "How have you been?" She hesitated. "Better. Working. Trying to stay busy." "Oh, I am glad," he said. "I was not sure if I would see you again." Her lips curved into a shy smile. "Neither was I." For a moment, neither spoke. The low sound of the espresso machine filled the space between them. When another customer called for her, Mia excused herself and returned to work, trying to calm her pulse. But each time she glanced toward the corner, he was still there, reading something on his phone, looking perfectly at home among the cracked tiles and flickering lights. He returned the next day. And the day after. By the fourth visit, Clara leaned over the counter with a grin. "That man of yours must really love our coffee." Mia flushed. "He is not. He just likes quiet places." But deep down, she knew that was not true. Over the next week, their conversations grew longer. They spoke about simple things: the smell of rain, favorite books, how the city seemed both lonely and alive at the same time. Adrian never mentioned his work, and Mia never asked. To her, he was just a man who liked black coffee and silence. To him, she was a reminder of what was real in a life filled with noise. One afternoon, the cafe was almost empty when a delivery truck splashed through a puddle outside, sending muddy water against the glass. Mia laughed as she wiped the window. Adrian watched her, his expression softening. "You laugh like someone who has learned to survive storms," he said. She turned, surprised. "Maybe because I have." "Oh." Their eyes met, and the moment lingered, delicate and quiet. Later that evening, as she left work, she found him waiting by the door. "It is late," he said. "Let me walk you home." "That is not necessary," she replied quickly, though her heart raced. "I insist," he said with a small smile. "It is the least I can do, after you made the best coffee I have had all year." They walked together through the soft drizzle, the streetlights painting gold reflections on the wet pavement. She told him about her tiny rented room near the old library, about how she drew sketches of people passing by to practice her art. He listened, genuinely interested. When they reached her building, he paused at the gate. "Mia," he said quietly, Do you ever wish for a life without fear? She looked up, puzzled. Everyone does. Then promise me something, he said. Do not let what happened to you decide what happens next. She swallowed hard. That is easier said than done. I know, he answered, his tone low. But sometimes, all it takes is believing someone else believes in you. She nodded, unable to find the right words. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small wrapped pastry from the cafe. For breakfast, he said. Mia laughed softly. You are strange, Mr. Sterling. I will take that as a compliment, he said, smiling. Then he turned and disappeared down the street, leaving her standing under the dim porch light, holding the pastry and wondering why her chest felt suddenly warm. That night, as she unwrapped the paper, she found a tiny napkin folded inside. On it was written in careful handwriting, "See you tomorrow." She read it twice, then smiled for the first time in a long while. She did not know that their quiet meetings were planting the seeds of something that would soon change everything, because behind Adrian's calm gray eyes, there was a truth waiting to be revealed. Days melted into weeks, and the rhythm of their mornings became a quiet ritual. Adrian would arrive at the cafe just after 8 o'clock, his coat draped neatly over the back of his chair, waiting for Mia to bring his usual order. She pretended not to look for him each morning, but her hands always trembled slightly until he walked through the door. He never tried to invade her space. He simply listened. He asked about her drawings, her favorite places in the city, and what made her smile as a child. Sometimes, he would take a napkin and sketch something himself. Clumsy lines, awkward shapes, and she would laugh, teasing him for having no talent at all. It was simple. Easy. The kind of peace that felt undeserved after so much pain. One afternoon, when the rain turned to soft sunlight, Adrian asked, "Do you still draw in the park?" "Sometimes," she said. "When I can afford new pencils." "Then come with me this weekend," he offered. "There is a small gallery downtown. I think you would like it." Mia hesitated. "I cannot walk into those places. People can tell I do not belong." He looked at her steadily. "Then they will be the ones who do not belong." "No." She smiled despite herself. "You always have an answer." "Maybe I just do not like seeing people forget their worth," he said. That Saturday, she met him outside the gallery. She wore a plain blue dress and the same jacket he had given her that night. The air smelled of fresh rain and spring flowers. Inside, the walls were lined with soft lights and canvases that glowed with color. Mia moved slowly from painting to painting, her eyes shining with quiet wonder. "These artists," she whispered, "they paint feelings, not faces." "That is why I wanted you to see them," Adrian said. "You have that same gift. You draw what you feel." She turned to him, a small laugh escaping her. "You barely know me." He smiled. "I know enough." Later, they sat outside on a bench, sharing a paper cup of coffee. The street below shimmered with sunlight. For the first time in months, Mia felt a sense of safety, of being seen without judgment. She forgot to guard her words. "I used to dream of owning a tiny studio," she said softly. "A place with big windows and white walls. I would teach kids to draw. Not for money, just to help them find something kind inside the chaos." Adrian watched her as she spoke, memorizing the light in her eyes. "You will have it one day," he said simply. She shook her head. "People like me do not get dreams like that. People like you," he said, "are exactly the ones who should." Ugh. As they walked back toward the bus stop, a gust of wind caught the hem of her jacket. She reached out to steady it, and her hand brushed against his. They both froze for a heartbeat, their eyes meeting, and neither pulled away. That evening, after she returned to her small room, she opened her sketchbook and began to draw. Not the park, not the cafe, not the city. She drew a man standing in the rain, his coat open, his hand reaching out not to rescue, but to remind her that she was still here, still alive. Across the city, Adrian placed the folded napkin she had doodled on into his desk drawer. It was a small sketch of a bird taking flight, signed only with her initials. He stared at it for a long time. He could not understand why that simple drawing felt heavier than all the deals and signatures that had ever passed through his hands. For the first time in years, the billionaire who had everything realized he wanted something that money could never buy: time with a woman who believed she did not deserve to dream. A month later, the cafe buzzed with talk about the city's annual charity gala. The event was a glamorous night where the richest families in town gathered to raise funds for local art programs. Mia only knew about it because her boss, Clara, had accepted a catering job for the event. Extra hands mean extra pay, Clara told her. You in? Mia agreed. She could use every dollar. On the night of the gala, she arrived at the grand hall, dressed in a simple black uniform, her hair tied neatly back. The chandeliers glowed above like frozen stars, and the sound of soft music floated through the air. She felt small among the glittering gowns and polished shoes, but she focused on her work balancing trays, refilling glasses, avoiding attention. Halfway through the evening, she heard the host speak into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, the visionary founder and CEO of Sterling Enterprises, Mr. Adrian Sterling. The tray nearly slipped from her hands. The name echoed through the hall like thunder. She turned toward the stage, her heart pounding. There he was, tall, composed, wearing the same quiet confidence she had always admired. But now she saw him differently. His name glowed on the giant screen behind him, his face framed by flashes of cameras. Every whispered moment they had shared replayed in her mind. The coffee, the drawings, the jacket. All this time, he had been a billionaire, living in a world she could never touch. Her throat tightened. She backed away from the crowd, trying to steady her breath. When she looked up, Adrian's gaze swept the room and found her. For a brief second, their eyes locked. He froze, as if realizing the storm that was about to break. Mia turned and hurried toward the corridor behind the ballroom. The clatter of heels and laughter faded behind her. She leaned against the wall, her heart racing, the truth cutting deeper with every beat. He had known who he was. She had not, and that made all the difference. For a man like Adrian Sterling, helping her had been an act of kindness. For her, it had been survival, hope, and maybe something dangerously close to love. Adrian left the stage as soon as the applause began to fade. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, but he barely heard them. He moved quickly through the hallway, following the faint echo of footsteps he already knew belonged to her. He found Mia near the service exit, standing beneath a flickering light. She looked up, her eyes red, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. "So this is who you are," she said softly. Her voice was not angry, just tired. He took a slow breath. "Mia, I wanted to tell you. I did not know how." "You had every chance," she replied. "Every day at that cafe, every walk home, you watched me talk about rent and bills while you owned half the city. Was it entertaining for you?" "No," he said firmly. "Never that. I did not want the truth to change how you saw me. It changed everything anyway." She stepped back. "You were kind to me, Adrian, but kindness feels different when it comes from a man who has everything." He looked at her helplessly. "You make it sound like I am untouchable. I am not. You saw me before all of this, before the name, before the company. That night at the hotel, you did not care who I was." She shook her head. "Because I did not know. Maybe that is the only reason I trusted you." A door opened somewhere down the hall, and voices echoed closer. She turned away. "I should go." "Mia, please," he said quietly. "Do not walk away because of my name." She paused at the door. "You should have trusted me with the truth," she said. "That is the difference between your world and mine. People like me cannot afford secrets." Then she walked out into the night, leaving him standing under the harsh white light. The sounds of the gala swelled again behind him, a world of polished laughter that suddenly felt empty. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, washing the city streets clean. Adrian stood by the window and watched, realizing that all his power meant nothing if the one person who saw him as human no longer believed in him. Days passed with no word from her. Adrian buried himself in meetings, but nothing held his focus. The city outside his office window looked smaller than ever, and every achievement suddenly felt hollow. His assistant mentioned that social media had begun circulating photos from the gala. At first, he ignored it. Then came the headlines. Mystery waitress seen with CEO Adrian Sterling. From cafe girl to billionaire's secret compagnon. The articles spread fast, their tone cruel and sensational. Someone had leaked the footage of the night Mia ran into the hotel. The camera angle caught her ducking behind his table, his hand lowering to help her up. The headlines twisted the truth into gossip. By evening, Mia's phone would not stop ringing. Journalists waited outside the cafe. Strangers online called her names she could not bear to read. Clara, her boss, tried to protect her, but business suffered. The following morning, Mia was asked to take a short break until things calmed down. She packed her apron in silence, her hands shaking. She moved back to her tiny motel room, avoiding the windows. She turned off her phone and tried not to cry. But the sound of laughter from the hallway reminded her how easily the world could tear down someone it did not understand. Across the city, Adrian sat before a news screen, watching the chaos unfold. His publicist suggested releasing a statement denying everything, claiming Mia was a fan who misinterpreted his kindness. He turned off the television and stood abruptly. "No," he said. "We tell the truth." That afternoon, Adrian called an emergency press conference. Cameras lined the room, waiting for his response. When the questions began flying, he raised a hand. "There has been a great deal of speculation," he said, his voice calm but steady. "Let me be clear. The woman in those photos is not a scandal. She is someone I met by chance, a woman who was in danger, and who showed me more courage than most people I know. Her name is Mia. She does not deserve to be harassed for my mistake." The reporters went silent. He continued. "If anyone should be held accountable, it is me. I failed to protect her privacy. I failed to respect her trust, but do not punish her for a story you do not understand." The footage aired across the nation that night. People saw the sincerity in his eyes, the crack in his composed tone when he said her name. Public sympathy began to shift. Some called it the most honest statement a billionaire had ever made. Others said it sounded like something deeper than apology. Mia watched the broadcast from her motel room. The flickering screen reflected in her tears. When he said, "She is someone I respect," her chest tightened. For the first time since the reveal, she did not feel ashamed. She felt seen. The next morning, there was a knock at her door. A hotel security officer handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a note written in Adrian's handwriting. "Do not hide anymore. The truth is already out, but so is your name. Let me fix what I broke." She stared at the words for a long time, unsure if she should go. Part of her wanted to believe him. Another part whispered that his world would only hurt her again. That evening, she stood by the motel window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. The jacket he had given her hung on the chair. She picked it up, tracing the stitching along the inside pocket where his business card had once been. Maybe, she thought, the only way to end a storm is to face it. She folded the note, placed it in her pocket, and stepped into the rain. The following weekend, the city hosted its first One Kindness Day, an event sponsored by the Sterling Foundation to honor acts of compassion that often went unnoticed. Banners hung across downtown streets, and a stage was set in the public plaza, surrounded by rows of chairs and bright spring flowers. Adrian stood backstage, straightening his tie. The air was cool, but his palms were warm with nerves. For the first time in years, he was not worried about investors or cameras. He was worried about one person. He did not know if she would come. Mia arrived quietly, blending into the crowd near the back. She wore the same jacket, the one he had given her the night they met. The noise of chatter and laughter filled the air. But when she saw his figure on stage, her heartbeat drowned everything else. The host spoke first, introducing Adrian as the man who had started the initiative. Applause rippled through the plaza, but he waited a moment before speaking. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady. "We live in a world where kindness is often seen as weakness. But sometimes, one kind act changes an entire life. I know that because it happened to me." Mia's breath caught. He continued, "Months ago, I met someone who reminded me what it means to be human. She did not know my name or my status. She only saw a stranger in need and chose to trust him. Tonight, I want to honor her courage not with words, but with action." He gestured to the side of the stage. A curtain pulled back to reveal a small art exhibit. Paintings and sketches hung under soft lights, each piece signed with the initials M.R. At the center stood one titled The Night of Rain. It showed a woman crouched under a table while a man shielded her from the storm. Gasps rose from the audience. Cameras flashed. Adrian turned toward the crowd. Every piece you see here was created by Mia Rivers. She once dreamed of teaching art to others. Starting today, the Sterling Foundation will fund the Open Hand Studio, a community art space in her name. The applause was thunderous, but Adrian was not looking at the audience. He was searching for her. Mia's hands trembled as people turned, smiling, pointing her out. She tried to hold back tears, but they spilled anyway. Slowly, she stepped forward, walking through the rows until she reached the stage. Adrian extended his hand, his eyes glistening under the lights. "You should have told me," she whispered when she reached him. "I should have," he said softly. "But if I had, maybe we would not be standing here now." The crowd watched as she hesitated, then took his hand. The applause grew louder, washing over them like rain. Adrian leaned closer and said, "I did not create this event for my company. I created it for you, because kindness deserves to be remembered." Mia smiled through her tears. "You still make things sound too easy." Maybe," he said, "but this time I mean every word." She laughed quietly, and for the first time, the sound felt free. Around them, the music swelled, the city lights gleamed, and in that moment, the noise of judgment faded. All that remained was the truth that had started it all. One act of kindness, two broken souls, and the promise of something real. 1 year later, sunlight poured through the wide windows of a small art studio on the corner of Willow Street. The sign above the door read, "Open Hand Studio." Inside, the walls were bright with children's paintings and sketches pinned like bursts of color against the white. Mia moved between the easels, her hands lightly guiding a group of young students mixing paints. The laughter of children filled the room. She smiled, remembering the nights she used to sit alone in a motel room, wondering if she would ever belong anywhere. Now, this little studio smelled of hope, paint, paper, and the soft sweetness of possibility. At noon, the door opened. Adrian stepped in, wearing a simple gray sweater instead of his usual suit. He carried 2 cups of coffee. "Still no sugar," he said with a grin. She laughed. "Some habits never change." He walked closer, glancing around at the paintings. "You did it, Mia. You made your dream real." "We made it real," she corrected him. "You believed when I could not." He set the coffee down on a paint-splattered table. "You gave me something that no one else ever has. You reminded me that all the success in the world means nothing if it is not shared." She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," he said. "It taught me that sometimes we find the people who change us when we are hiding from the world." Mia's eyes softened. "And sometimes," she said, "the people who save us are the ones who need saving too." Outside, a light breeze carried the sound of laughter from the park nearby. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. Mia blinked, surprised. "Adrian?" He opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring, engraved with the words, "The Night of Rain." Her breath caught. "You do not have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to. This is not about the past or what we went through. It is about what comes next. I want to stand beside you, not in front of you, not above you, just with you." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Then yes," she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands steady but trembling slightly at the same time. Around them, the children clapped, not understanding the moment but feeling its warmth. Later, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, they stepped outside together. The city glowed in gold and rose, the air soft with the hum of life. The old jacket she once wore that night was now framed inside the studio, hanging above the doorway with a small plaque beneath it that read, "The night kindness began." Mia leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not run into that hotel?" Adrian smiled. "I like to think fate would have found another way." She laughed softly. "Then maybe the best mistakes are the ones that lead us home." Ardo, and as they stood there under the fading light, the noise of the world melted away. What remained was simple 2 hearts that had found courage in kindness, truth in forgiveness, and love in a moment born from fear. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was something rarer. It was real.